What's happening? Andy here. I'm joined today by my good friend Bob Goldberg. How are you, Bob? What's happening?
Oh, Andy, great to see you. How's everything? What's happening? And keep me informed of everything in the industry. I
Oh, well,
watch you and read you every week.
someone's got to do it. Thank you for being that person who's actually watching. Um, we are in the pink over here in Rochester, New York. It's not raining. It's sunny. It's kind of nice. So you're in Chicago. You're home. You're in your wonderful home office with all your books and balls. And I thought it'd be a good time to check in. We haven't talked in a while, and we had some big news with the FTC recently. I think the last video you and I did together was talking about this move that the FTC was looking at doing, which was, I think, if I'm saying it right, eliminating the non-compete contracts, something that has been very prevalent in our industry. I know I signed a couple of those back when I sold copiers back in the 90s. Um, why don't you fill us in? Tell us a little bit about what that was all about, what the announcement is, and what does this mean for our wonderful dealer community that's hopefully watching this.
Well, they're all watching, I know, because give them the information they need. And this is certainly a topic that is relevant and timely. This actually began with the Biden administration signing an executive order that they wanted to eliminate non-compete agreements and make it easier for workers to be able to go from one position to another. They believe that if workers are not restricted, there'll be more businesses open, there'll be greater effect on the economy. So the Biden administration sort of sent a signal to all of the agencies to consider this. Now, there already had been several states. There's about 5 states, California, Minnesota, North Dakota, Oklahoma, um, that, and I'd say Colorado, that all have eliminated non-competes already. California was probably the best known. So if you were in California and you were an employee, you were not going to be subject to a non-compete because they're unenforceable in California. So the other states picked up on that. There are a number of states that have limited restrictions on terms of non-competes. And the reason this all came about was that they, there was a franchisor who had employees making sandwiches in the franchise locations, and they put them all under non-compete. These are minimum wage workers because they're afraid they'd all go and leave and work for a competitor once they were trained. So
Sounds
the
familiar.
yeah, the administration basically, come on, these kids are making $15, $8 an hour. We're not going to restrict them, so we have to do something about it. The FTC predicted that there would be 30 million workers impacted by this rule. It's going to have significant ramifications. They published it back in April, and there was a comment period that was there that people could comment on the rule, the good, the bad, the indifferent, changes, modifications. There were 26,000 um, comments filed with the FTC. But what blew my mind, 25,000 of those were in favor of the non-competes, in favor of eliminating the non-competes.
Oh, okay.
Only 1,000 said, no, we shouldn't have them. And of those thousands, I'm pleased that the Business Technology Association came on record to basically say to the FTC, we put a lot of money into developing our customer base. We have confidential information about the business, the contacts, the amounts, lease amounts, maintenance amount, everything else. If our employees could just leave and start and use that information, it would be detrimental. So they made some adjustments to the published rule, which was, by the way, just published this week on May 7th. The FTC published the rule, and if nothing were to happen on September 4th, it would become effective. But I'll give you a little of more insight to the extent that there's a case pending in Texas, brought by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that says the FTC has exceeded their authority. The FTC's mandate, and as you may recall, I worked there for a number of years, is to prohibit unfair and deceptive practices and false and misleading advertising and those type of things. The Chamber of Commerce says that the FTC is interfering with the private right to contract, and that private right is not subject to their um, jurisdiction. So they're saying it's unconstitutional. So we're in a state where we don't know really what's going to be, but I can give you some insight because I think there's some things the dealers should do. Now, what does the rule prevent? The rule prevents any kind of restriction on employee from seeking or accepting or working for a competitive organization. So you can't seek a job if you're restricted from seeking, taking, or working. That would be a restriction that this new rule would prohibit. And it also prohibits any restriction on operating another business or company. So basically, it says the rule no longer can there be in a contract with an employee that they can't go out and accept a job, work for someone else, or start their own business. So that's what the goal is. The FTC feels that by having these restrictions, employers will increase wages, increase benefits, and improve working conditions. They think those things will have to be done in order to maintain and retain your workers. So they look at it as being a increase into the economy by having additional compensation, benefits, et cetera. So where are we at? The rules there, the restrictions are in place. If the courts don't find it unconstitutional, on September 4th, non-competes will no longer be enforceable in the United States against any employee. Now, I want to make a distinction because I've had a number of calls on the BTA legal hotline. What about my non-compete that I signed when I sold my business? Those are still enforceable. This only applies to employees. Non-competes in conjunction with the sale of a business are enforceable because someone's paid you for those customers, they paid you for those rights, etc. Now, there's an exception that exists for senior workers that are management workers, basically making more than 151,000, but that's limited and for a limited time period. If the rule goes in effect on September 4th, every one of our dealers that has a non-compete in place with an employee currently is going to have to give them notice that it's no longer enforceable and they're no longer obligated by that agreement. It's an affirmative thing that an employer must do. They must tell their employees, "Yep, I got you to sign that when you came on. You think you can't do it? I'm telling you now, you're free to go, free to do what you want." So that is a notice requirement that will have to go out. I'm waiting a little bit to see what the court says. If the court were to enjoin the enforcement of the rule, then this notice wouldn't be required. So, I think we can let sleeping dogs lie for a little bit, not in fact, start giving out these notices. We have till September 4th. Let's see what happens in July and August over that time. Now, Andy, like you asked me before, what's a dealer going to do? How do they protect their machines in the field, their customer base, and everything else? Well, there's a number of things that they should consider. First of all, there's something they don't need to do at all, and it's called a trade secret. Every state has what's called the Trade Secret Act, but there are requirements to establish information as a trade secret. There are things a dealer must do to keep it confidential, not, to limit the access to certain information, etc. They're burdens. I've been in a number of cases where someone's alleged a trade secret, and I start at the front door when someone walks and talks to the receptionist. Are they limited where they go? Are they escorted where they go? Do you keep your customer list, your maintenance contracts, your lease agreements under lock and key? Is there limited access on your network? All those type of things. So the trade secret thing, when I've been on the side where someone's trying to say that we violated the trade secrets, I can usually find some wiggle room to get out from under that. But there's other things that can be done. At one time, the FTC was thinking that perhaps non-solicitation agreements should be barred as well. What's the difference between a non-compete and a non-solicitation? A non-compete says you can't work. You can't go to work for someone. You can't, start a business in competition, etc. It limits your ability to work. A non-solicitation says, Andy, you can go work for Frank Canada. You just can't call on any of the customers that Jake established for you. It's not going to work. So dealers should be looking at establishing a non-solicitation that says, you work for me, you found out about these contacts and customers while you work for me. You can go out and work for anyone you want, but for a limited period of time, you can't solicit those customers for which you got confidential information while you were here. And part and parcel with that confidential non-solicitation is confidential information. So a non-solicitation confidentiality agreement would really help protect the dealer community and protect the investment they've made in establishing their customer base. You'd have a confidentiality agreement. A lot of people, a lot of dealers have those in their employee manual at this time. And also, though, they could be incorporated into the non-solicitation agreement. There's also some things the FTC you can do. I haven't seen this in our industry as much. It's called a garden leave. You stop working physically at a location, let's say on December 31st. The employer continues to pay you from December 31st to the following December 31st for a year. Pays you your salary, gives you your benefits, everything else. You just don't have any responsibilities. So you basically are paying 1 year's compensation on a garden leave, not to do anything or not to, you're still working for me. I just don't have you do anything, but you owe me that fiduciary duty of loyalty.
Right.
Now, the other thing I think that dealers should look at, and we have used these many times in our industry, is a training repayment agreement. And BTA has a couple on the BTA website. And a retraining payment agreement says that I'm going to send you to XYZ school for a week. You're going to get trained on XYZ equipment. And for me to do that, number one, I've got to pay your transportation. I probably got to pay your hotel, your meals. Plus, I'm going to lose the compensation that you would bring in or the revenue you'd bring in while you're there for a week's revenue. So my cost of training you to become an expert in A, B, or C is going to be $3,000. You're going to sign a note that you owe us $3,000. But that note's not going to be payable with money. It's going to be payable with you staying on board at our company. So each month, let's say it's a 12-month note, 1/12 of that 3,000 is paid off. If you leave anytime before
That's
that one
fair.
year, the remainder would be paid.
That's
Um,
very fair.
well, it is fair, but the only thing that the FTC got a little nervous that we'd say it was $50,000 worth of training when we only incurred 30,000. So it has to be a reasonable amount.
Okay.
That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see people twisting that.
Yep. No, I would hope, people would be calculate all the costs that are incurred.
But all of this is so much to just go through because look, there's two sides to this. Dealers have a ton to protect, and sales reps, you get into an industry for 5, 10, 20 years, right? Things change at the dealership or the branch that you're at, new management. You don't get along with people. And it's just sometimes it's just time to move on and you're locked in. I've got a buddy I started with and he's very happy now, but over the years there's been a couple times where he wasn't happy and he wanted to move along and he couldn't. He just couldn't even look at anybody else because no one would talk to him. No one would no one wanted to go up against his current employer and say, and even to your point of, look, we can, and I forget you had a term for it, but let's take this rep and put them in a different territory. He or she won't call on any of their old clients. But the big fear for the dealer is what? Yeah, they're not going to call on any of their old clients, but at the end of the day, they're going to sit down with the rep who's handling that territory and they're going to say, hey, here's 10 accounts. This is what's going on in them. You didn't hear it from me. You can take me out to lunch. right? I mean, and so they're just as vulnerable as they were before. Um, it seems like we're making a lot of changes, but nothing's changing. We still have the same problem. We still have the fear that a sales rep is going to just take everything they have from you and take their training and leave. And now the dealer is not protected. Although, I see the benefit, right? Like as a sales rep, you were just completely locked in. There was nothing you could do. So I don't know that they fixed anything. They certainly changed it. They seem to be putting all the power or most of the power in the hands of the salesperson, which, in many ways is fair. But back to the original point, how do these guys protect themselves? And do you think we're going to see a spike in lawsuits with, with respect to customers that are, maybe being moved to an account to a competitor? Do you think we're going to see more lawsuits? Do you think we're going to see more? This guy stole my account when he left, and is it
Well,
or less?
I've always discouraged the lawsuit. Many
You're an
dealers have the
arbitrator. You like
non-competes
to keep
now.
everyone happy.
Yeah, and the non-competes, I always tell we can go to court on that, and if I'm representing the sales rep, I always tell you I'd bring in, you know, the wife, six kids, put them in the first row and say, we're just trying to earn a living to feed my family,
Which is what
Joe.
they're doing
Well, yeah,
a
but
lot of times.
you know what, Andy, when you talk about the poor sales rep, he got compensated for all those sales he made. He was paid for his effort. He didn't have the investment. You have telemarketers getting leads for them. You have all the infrastructure that goes in and everything else. What I always say, and I found it very effective in our industry, if one of your employees goes to one of your competitors, normally you know who the owner of that competitor is. And you can have a conversation. Listen, Andy, I understand you just hired Jake. Jake was very valuable to us, but he wants to move on and I want to stop him. Andy, I don't want to make any trouble. I don't want to go to court. You keep him out of my accounts directly or indirectly, because that indirectly you just referenced, by the way, call
Yeah,
on Bob,
that's the fear.
yeah. But you know what? Most owners will respect that because, but for the next week, one of their people can be coming over.
Well, and that's cooler heads will prevail, and that's the way it should work. But you and I know, and there was just, last year a very visible example of that between two heavyweights, and and it winds up playing out in front of the world, and it's just ugly, and it's over, it's over a person, right? It's over a person who just wants to quietly maybe move on to another opportunity. And but back to the point of I know you trained me. I know you gave me my career. I know you made me the living that I made for the last 10 years, but then you changed my comp plan, but then you changed my territory. And then you changed my quotas, you changed my support. I have a new sales manager that hates me, right? And so everything's changed, everything's different. And I think at a certain point, a sales rep should have that right, to go explore other opportunities. And if I've made a career out of the office equipment industry, at 40 years old, 50 years old, I don't want to go start in pharmaceuticals. I don't want to go start somewhere else. I know this industry. Maybe I'm not going to call on my old customers, although I probably would love to. Um, I do see it as being very heavy-handed on the side of the OEMs or the dealers. But, I keep coming back to if I'm a dealer, if I own that dealership, I don't want this guy going with all my trade secrets. I mean, look, the biggest trade secret is what the customer is going to be buying around this time. I mean, is that really like, and honestly, the other dealer should know that, right? They should have somebody in the field that's calling that same account every 30, 60 days and 90 days and finding out where are you in your buying cycle. And everybody should have all that information. So I guess when you think of it from that perspective, maybe the dealer, you know, shouldn't have this non-compete. I am leaning more towards the side of the sales rep, but man, I do see the risk for that dealer. It's scary. It's very scary for them.
Well, it's clear, Andy, that you were a sales rep at one time and now representing the Sales Rep Association. And I've heard all those arguments.
Yeah, I
But
bet you have.
unfortunately, on the flip side, we've done a lot on the dealer community to protect the customer base. Leasing companies won't give out information to a third party in terms of lease terminations. They protect the dealer base. Dealers, with the OEMs keep things pretty confidential. And we know a number of OEMs that have put up, a wall between their direct sales and their indirect sales so that they don't get information back and forth.
Yep.
Dealers make a significant investment.
Yeah.
Uh, I, I always, I've been a proponent for years. Show your employees your financials because they all think you're making 10 times more than you're bringing home. You
Hmm.
know, they they
Well, they
they
see the
all
nice
think
car and the nice house, right? And they think it's off of their back. They don't realize that, you spent $1 million trying to get this managed services program off the ground out of your own pocket, and you haven't made a dime yet.
right, and you have that loan at the bank that is at 8% interest right
Yeah, and
now.
payroll is coming up in 2 weeks, and then again in 2 weeks, and then again, and you know what I mean? So,
Oh, I know. Well, this new law is going to change things. If dealers have non-competes, they should reevaluate that. They should look at implementing non-solicitation confidentiality agreement and move forward.
it's a big change. We've had these regulations or law, I guess laws, right? Or contracts in place since I've been doing it. And I'm sure it was years before that. It's probably my dad was probably under a non-compete from Xerox back in the day. It's nothing new, but it is a change that has taken a long time to get here. We've been hearing about it for years. Um, I'm surprised it finally happened, but here we are. So you've given some great advice, and I think dealers are really going to appreciate this.